economic competitiveness. And given to the fact that, I don't know if it's fact already or not, but at least Mr. Bambang said so, that there's a good planning to 2020 for the seaport development and improvement. Are we heading there? And how to make sure that, you know, this development is not only on planning, but implemented? So that in 2030, we can see that seaports is taking place, so we can make the most out of it. I'll give to Mr. Bambang first to answer this.
I guess the term that we like to use is that we have a good planning but less follow through. Yes, number one. Number two, we build something that we don't plan. We plan something that we don't build. So again, it's a matter of priorities as well as what I call the execution problem. If you are trying to develop a list of problems in terms of infrastructure development in Indonesia, you will come up with land acquisition is one of the problems.
But we've got the policy to acquire land, right? We've got the, what's it called? The law to do so.
I think the law has some breakthrough in terms of you have certainty on how many days all the process you have to follow. Before, we don't have that kind of law and regulation. But the problem in our planning is that many of the new proposed projects are not outlined in the previous spatial planning, Rencana Tata Ruang. If so, you can imagine that for somebody who holds some land and suddenly they have in the next days that the government will build something that needs half of their land or his land. So is it fair? So that kind of issues are coming now, and in the new law, although we have material and immaterial compensations, but still you have to follow a suit, and then that gives some delays in terms of execution of the field.
Okay, Mr. Faisal, would you like to jump in to the discussion?
In the last 4 years, I've been mistaken, gasoline subsidy are bigger than spending for infrastructure. Now, we have a bigger room to double infrastructure expenditure because the subsidy for gasoline is almost zero. So this is the right time for us to start to speed up the process of infrastructure development. In the past, infrastructure expenditure was only 2 until 2.5% of our GDP. Now we can increase to 4 to 5% of GDP. It's still not enough, but significant increase. Secondly, initiatives of local government to speed up the process of infrastructure development is getting more significant. For example, in Banyuwangi, what's the name? Abdullah Azuranas. The local budget is very limited, but it can engineer the way to build, to create a new 30-kilometer roads by very minimum local funds.
So this is the mayor of the Banyuwangi that you refer to.
Yeah, and more mayors are very creative, such as in Bantai, in Sulawesi, Wakatobi, Pak Hugua, Ridwan Kamil in Bandung, Suyoto in Bojonegoro. I'll be there to give inputs, how to use oil money they receive to speed up development in Bojonegoro. Pak Bupati will initiate kind of sarasehan to speed up the process. So I'm quite optimistic. More money from the central and more initiative from the local. I hope it will increase quite significantly to infrastructure development.
We hope so. So I'd like to invite you to join our discussion today. A lady over there, I need a gentleman over there with the hat. I've got you after this, sir. So we'll start off with the lady over there, please.
Thank you very much. Selamat sore Bapak dan Ibu, nama saya Dewi. I currently attend the graduate degree at the University College London. My major is in Science, Technology and Society. I'm very pleased that Pak Umar and Pak Faisal have briefly touched on the subject of education and the Indonesian human capital, scholarship. Obviously, most of us who attend the UK education at the moment are benefiting from such scheme, myself included. So that's very beneficial. Unfortunately, we have so much to catch up from the Malaysian colleagues. At my school, Indonesian students are only about 1/10 to 1/5, 10 sampai 20% dari the Malaysian students. That's quite sad. So, mumpung Pak Umar Joro masih ada di sini, if I'm allowed one question for him.
You need to Faisal Bambang first.
You come in.
As of late, the Indonesian government have been allocating like 20% of the national budget for education. However, we haven't seen so many improvement in terms of science achievement. PISA, using PISA, for example, as a standard or any other achievement we've lacked so far. Could you probably elaborate and in what aspect that we could kita bisa perbaiki dari sisi itu? Untuk Pak Faisal Basri, I find it quite interesting that you choose to elaborate your speech with some words from Alexis de Tocqueville, because on the way from London here, in the car, we exchanged a couple of chat with some friends about the notion that Indonesian government at the moment is perceived as a weak government, a weak administration. How do you see that in terms of what it could impact on the current economy? How that would play a role, either negative or positive, in the next AFTA or ASEAN competition? For Pak Bambang Susantono, one last thing. I was mesmerized by your modeling future regional development. If you forget about it, let me remind you a bit about it. It's a beautiful picture of how cities in Indonesia were connected by dots of railways and ferries and such. It's just marvelous. However, 6 months ago, prior to my departure to London to study, I was an avid user of the Jakarta KRL. It was one of the worst public transportation systems in a developing countries that is in the middle level, I think. Now, my question is, how do you assure us that all those modeling future could materialize while for years and years the government of Indonesia failed to address the problem, a simple problem such as probably not simple to be fair, such as the KRL. How are you sure that it's not just going to be your modeling, it's not going to be another historical story of the MP3? Thank you very much.
Although Mr. Bambang Susantono is a former Vice Minister of Transportation, I think it is still relevant, isn't it? Thank you, Dewi, for the questions. Would like to go to the second audience. Please identify yourself.
Selamat sore, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Mohon maaf sebelumnya saya akan menanyakan dalam bahasa Indonesia, jadi nanti Mas Rory minta tolong di subtitle. Nama saya Desi, Pak. Saya sedang mengambil jurusan Transport Planning di University of Leeds. Jadi mudah-mudahan pertanyaannya relevan dengan materi-materi yang Bapak sampaikan. Terkait dengan konteks ASTA dan juga meningkatkan competitiveness, banyak kecenderungan untuk mulai memprivatisasi beberapa state-owned enterprise atau BUMN. Kemudian untuk memprivatisasi aset-aset negara juga. Bagaimana tanggapan Bapak mengenai hal itu? Terutama saya punya ketertarikan tersendiri mengenai railway, Pak, karena secara nature-nya itu sulit sekali untuk terutama dengan Undang-Undang Nomor 23 2007 kalau saya tidak salah, mau memisahkan antara infrastruktur dengan operating company-nya. Nah, apa hambatannya sampai sekarang mengapa belum terrealisasi dan apakah itu sebenarnya arah yang sesuai untuk infrastruktur kita? Terima kasih.
The third question, please.
Hello, hi. My name is Shandi. I work and live in London at the moment. My question is either going to Mr. Bambang or Mr. Faisal. It's about the competitiveness of Indonesia. At the moment, we know that the problem we are facing with this Asian Economic Community or Asian Free Trade is that we are facing challenges, both challenges and opportunities. Yeah? Now, we know that the keys for us to succeed in this competition is to have efficient and effective infrastructure, regulation, bureaucracy, and reputation. Now, the infrastructure has been mentioned by Mr. Bambang and has, I think he managed to impress us with such beautiful pictures. Yeah, and we all hope that it's going to be realized soon, sooner even, I think, because we are facing this demographic bonus, yes. Now, and that's another piece, the other side of the coin as well. That with this demographic bonus, if we don't, the demographic bonus will become a bonus if the people in this productive age to have income. But the fact is, lots of Indonesians in this age, they still jobless. They're still jobless. So that's the other side of the coin. And we do have still problem in the infrastructure. Definitely, we have problem in regulations. We have problem in bureaucracy. We have problem, and then the biggest problem is reputation. That is the biggest problem we are facing. Although we are the biggest economy in Asia, but we have the worst reputation. I believe I'm sorry to say this, but this is the perception that I've got from after living 10 years abroad. So that part, I believe, is the thing that require big attention as well. That has been undermined, I think, by the Indonesian government at the moment. So in the future, I hope the government will will see this as one of the important thing to look after. The infrastructure. What I want to highlight in this question is that if the picture that Mr. Bambang has shown us, that is really still far away from the reality what we have at the moment. Now, if we compare that to what Malaysia already have, and Singapore already have, and Thailand and Philippines, they are way ahead of us. Yeah, we have problem with infrastructure and we have problem with the human resources. I think has been mentioned by a few of other colleagues here. Now, what can we do now? Because APTA is in front of our door already, and there is no way for us to avoid that. What can make the people? What can make the investor not to choose Malaysia over Indonesia or Singapore over Indonesia to invest their money? And what is not going to make the people of Indonesia, where we are labeled as cheaper labor, to move to Malaysia to produce that? Okay, so I think that was my question.
I'd like to make sure about your last question. Is it about what should we do in order to make that our migrant workers were not going to Malaysia, or to reduce the number of migrant workers?
Yeah, the infrastructure in other countries in Asia, they have better infrastructure, yeah, and they have better soft infrastructure as well. They have better procedure, they have better regulations, they have better laws. They pay better compared to Indonesia. So it will not, this AFTA thing will make even easier for Indonesian people to move or to work abroad. Okay.
I'd like to start off with David's question. This is an ironic fact that I've ever heard from Malaysian colleague, that Malaysian students are the number 3 or the top 3 students in the UK in terms of international students. One is China, and then India, and Malaysia, and Indonesia, far beyond like the big 20 of the students within that kind of rank. So according to David's question, what should be done to close these gaps so that we will have more opportunity to study overseas, especially in the UK context? And then she has also like Mr. Bambang to elaborate on what aspect that regional future development can be done, because she experienced that KRL was the worst transportation in Indonesia, and Indonesian government is seen as a weak government, and what the effects of that kind of stereotype. I'd like to start with Mr. Faisal.
Okay, number of students from Indonesia, only 20%, Malaysia. Let's use observation by Michael Todaro, development economist, textbooks used by almost universities in Indonesia. He found out that higher education benefit less to the society. So the social benefit from higher education is less than the cost. So if we still believe on Todaro observation, research, we have to strengthen middle school, junior high school and senior high school. And I will relate to Maduro PowerPoint. He didn't explain more the result of PISA. PISA measure scientific literacy rate, mathematical literacy rate, and reading literacy rate. You know, if we observe from 2002 until 2002 until 2012, and if you make regression based on that period, we found that the coefficient is negative, meaning there is deceleration process in 3 categories, not acceleration. Very small number of countries having this negative coefficient. So I think we have to strengthen middle school to make the benefit more and more to the society, to give same access of opportunity to all Indonesian people to reach higher education. Otherwise, inequality will be more and more widened. So the issue of inequality, as we can read from Capital in the 21st Century by Piketty, will be very more serious one. So I hope Pak Anies Baswedan can play very important role to strengthen basic education, especially in junior and senior high school.
But apart from that, given the fact that my Malaysia colleague told me that they have 5 LPDP-alike funder organizations, while we only have DIPTI and we only have LPDP for sending out our students abroad. Should we maintain this, or should we improve this so that the number of funder organizations will send out more students in the future?
Again, if we allocate more resources, because we have to strengthen the input for PDP. Now, you know, the access for PDP mostly go to middle and up society.
Okay.
So we have to strengthen first the access of opportunity. That's why I stress junior high school, senior high school, to make the quality of all junior and senior high school from Sabang to Merauke, West, not very jomplang, you know.
Starch.
One side PL, the other side in Banten, you know, have to walk 10 kilometers from their village to get to school. So, equity is more important for me.
Okay. Dr. Bambang, do you agree?
I think I agree, fully agree with what has been told by my colleague. Access to basic education, I think more and more in these recent days not becoming an issue anymore like before. But again, we're facing some here and there challenges. But the question now is how we speed up all the capacity building while at the same time we have to compete. And we have 250 million people. For those who are in education, only 10%, 30-40% of us. And then this is another challenge that we face.
And regarding about the third point, Indonesian government is seen as a weak government, and it is feared that it will affect our economy. How do you relate that about this kind of stereotype with our economy, in a sense of how other countries see our economy?
Yeah, because we move from low competition, low political competition, to high political competition. Pak Jokowi is very different with Pak Suharto. Pak Harto monopolized the power, so he can do anything he wants. Pak Jokowi supported by only PDIP 19% of the votes, plus 6%, 25%, Hanura 3%, less than 40%, less than 30%. And you know, he is like CEO controlled by controlling shareholder. Ibu Megawati.
Or is it visible?
KMP.
Is it visible?
KMP is not polisi merah putih, Kala, Megan, and Palo. So, you know, Jokowi is the first president coming from nowhere. He's not chairman of the party. He's not elite of the party. So he has to consolidate the power. Need time to consolidate it. He doesn't have luxurious to do what he wants, 100%. So it takes time, and I think KPK versus police and so on and so forth will accelerate the consolidation power, and finally, Pak Jokowi know exactly who are the friends, who are the enemies, and if you met friends and enemies, quite clear now. So again, it takes time for Jokowi to consolidate the power. That's why it seems that the government is less effective.
But there will be always light at the end of the tunnel, isn't it?
Yes.
I'd like to move to the second person who asked a question today. So there's a tendency to privatize state-owned companies. Is that true? Mr. Bambang.
I would like to address one of the...
Oh, sure. About KRL.
About KRL. Actually, KRL, or Indonesian Railway, now is in the middle of what I call rail pollution. Not revolution, but rail pollution. Because, again, they are transforming right now. And when was your last time riding a KRL?
September 15th.
Is there any UI folks here? Is there any who are using KRL? You have to tell her then how is that? Because nowadays it's really changing. I mean that if you are comparing with a year from now or 2 years from now, it's really a different situation. Before, for example, you still see a lot of double-deckers people. Those who are, you know, in the atapas. Second line. My colleague always tease me saying that yeah, di Jakarta itu double-decker, yang atas itu. But we don't see them again right now. And now, if you see the station, it's very clean. You know, it's very sterile. If you don't have a ticket, you cannot get in. And even though now we can use the ATM or ticketless, yeah, mobile phone as well, a lot of things is changing. But again, the challenge that you have to transport a lot of people with a limited capacity. Now they are moving about 600 to 700,000 people per day, and the target is 1.2 million people a day. And you know how many trips in Jakarta every day? 26 million. So again, we are talking about some rail pollution that has to be there, and depending on how you see this, for example, is this half empty or half full? I'm optimistic. I will see this as half full. So we are in the middle of that, and I believe that if you go back to Jakarta maybe next year, it will change a lot again. I believe.
But we will find that by the time you're coming back.
At least my folks also would like to use the KRL from Jakarta because it's very convenient now from Jakarta. You don't have to, you know, Di macet ya.
Very cheap.
Very cheap also. Dosen UI soalnya.
Alright, regarding this his question.
On modeling, yes, I show you some modeling based on assumption, of course. Models always being developed based on assumption. What I would like to show you in those figures and charts and also some maps is that those are very ideal conditions. And I will invite you, all of you, to be exposed to challenge actually, because what I believe is that I'm seeing here the face of leaders of Indonesia that will trying to make that happen. Maybe not in my era. My era will be finished within the next 5 years or 7 years. But your era will be the one that should make those our dream happening on the field. Yeah? But again, it has to be done in such a way that stage by stage. You cannot just sort of like leapfrogging. I don't believe about leapfrogging theory that being developed in the previous years. You have to do it in stage. Yeah? And this year, budget for infrastructure is also unprecedented in history. Yeah. We are experiencing double of our budget in infrastructure, especially in Ministry of Public Works and Ministry of Transportation. Yeah. Now, what I heard from the field, dari lapangan misalnya, they are competing, trying to find manpower and workers. Supervisors and workers. Just simply because this is double. The size is double, and we are shortage of alat berat, heavy equipment. If you calculate that, you have to import a lot of things.
So we're getting there, so a better infrastructure.
I think so. This year will become a bit chaotic in my conditions, but after this year, because we are moving into that kind of directions, then we are going to see some accelerations, hopefully, in the next coming years.
What do you think about the notion that, or the stereotype that there is a tendency to privatize state-owned companies? And the second question of this is, infrastructure and operating company will be divided, but it's not taking place yet. So what's the theory of it?
I don't like the word privatization of infrastructure. What is really happening is public-private partnership, and that is different because we are not selling our stakes or shares in infrastructure. We are just having some joint ventures in trying to develop and manage infrastructure. That's really different animal between privatization and public-private partnership. And because the infrastructure usually have a natural monopoly characteristic, yeah? Because again, you can imagine that if you build one airport, it's impossible that you build another airport next to others. And then you will try to, for example, okay, we will provide some tap water if you are, landed in this airport and not that. That's impossible. So there is no competition in the market, but competition for the market, for infrastructure. In that way, so that public-private partnership is essential, because if we calculate all the demand of the funds for infrastructure, still government unable to finance about 30% to 35%. The rest will be coming from state-owned enterprise as well as private sectors. That is why still we have to develop our investment climate for public-private partnership. And for the second question about the unbundling between infrastructure and the rolling stock, I think that follows the principles that we unbundle the function of regulator and operator. In previous regime of our laws and regulations, we still see that state-owned enterprise is being regulated as well as operator. Nowadays, we would like to have some competition, quote unquote, in terms of providing services for infrastructure. That's why we deregulate, for example, air transportations. Garuda and Merpati is no longer monopoly. We open that up. I think in the railway industry, it is also starting to see some private companies, especially in the freight transportation, not in the passengers railway. Because passenger railway is still regulated, is still subsidized. That's why it's cheap, according to Faisal Basri. But for freight transportation in Kalimantan, for example, nowadays there is a construction of aluminium as well as coal mining that trying to develop the special railway for their commodities.
I hope
I
it
just
helps to
like
answer.
to add
Oh, please. Yes,
my
please.
experience as the user of IRL.
Still, Karel.
There is RL mania.
My office is in Jalan Pelaju, Blora area, Sudirman, very close to Duku Atas rail station. From Depok, UI campus to Duku Atas cost you only 3,000 rupiah. Full air condition. The schedule is very short, very okay, and you can predict,
Ada copetnya
plan.
Ada copet.
Ini rajanya.
And then from Depok to Duku Atas, and from Duku Atas to SCBD, I use Transjakarta. 3,500 rupiah. Last year, the cost from Depok to Duku Atas is 8,000. Reduced to 3,000. The difference is what we call it public service obligation.
Yes, sir.
The government pay PTKI 5,000 person. That's why no need to be at the top of the roof because very cheap, So the government bring illegal to legal, and then gradually increase the fare gradually. So I think it's very clever. And so Pak Bambang is deputy minister.
But the bottom line is KRL is improving right now compared to years.
Improving in terms of everything.
Okay.
Our friend from Kompas, mostly live in SCBD, use KRL. Secondly, there is a tendency to nationalize private company, such as in Jakarta, Palija, buyback by Jakarta government, and Pak Jokowi said in campaign period would like to buy back Indosat. So different way. In reality, there's a kind of misleading in interpreting nationalism.
We all hope that this optimism will materialize so that Indosat and other sold-out company will be acquired again by Indonesia. Okay, our third question, our third audience who asked about the competitiveness. What can we do now to attract FDI, foreign direct investment, amid the situation that Indonesia is facing infrastructure problems, education, employment problems, and a very bad reputation?
What I know in more detail is in oil and gas sector, you need 284 permits, ranging from government agencies to other government agencies.
That's so many windows.
16 government agencies issue permits. Now, the Minister of SDM, Energy and Mineral Resources, would like to cut to 60. But there are some regulation under different ministries, such as, for example, Ministry of Finance implemented land PBB, land and property tax for exploration. British Petroleum has concessions in West Aru, 3 times the area, 3 times of Bali Island. So they have to pay 60 million US dollar just for PBB, land and property tax. So it makes the oil companies angry, and they quit it from Indonesia and invest in other countries.
So because of a lot of these red tapes, bureaucratic problems.
Red tapes. This is regulation issued by Ministry of Finance. Now it's in Pengadilan Pajak, taxation court. If you complain, you still have to pay half of the 60 million, and finally they quit it from Indonesia. So these kind of things make us headaches. It seems to me that coordinating function is very weak under Pak Jokowi government.
Bambang, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I think to be competitive, we have to at the same time improve not only the hardware, infrastructure kind of things, but also hardware, software, one that mentioned by Pak Faisal in terms of how to ease of doing business, as well as the brainware. These 2 things has come together, and that's a really challenge. I believe that there's no such a simple solution for this, but we have to do this because if, for example, if you only build infrastructure, there is a theory saying that infrastructure is necessary but not sufficient to promote the economic growth. We still have a good investment climate. We still have to cut the red tape. We still have to streamline, for example, all the necessary process in order for us to be competitive. But let me tell you that in the last 2 months, I was invited by so many prospective investors. And what they see is not until all the process is smooth and stuff like that. No, they would like to jump in the middle of transition. Because if they jump in, if all the procedure is already settled, they will be a follower. They will be ahead of those process, and if they can predict how the risk mitigation and also time to do some business in Indonesia, then they will be ahead of others. So this is a situation that is to be found by the investor right now.
Okay. One of the challenges of the implementation of AFTA and AEC is the freer people movement within the region. It may risk that our best talent would move from Indonesia to other countries within the ASEAN region. Do you fear about that?
Number of accountants in Indonesia is only 30,000. Australia with 21 million has 200,000 accountants. That's why the price of accountant in Indonesia is very expensive. And without waiting ASEAN community, many accountants come from IPB, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. And that's good. So it's already happened, already there. Number of, what we call it, mathematicians, calculate insurance, what? Actuaries. You know the number of actuaries in Indonesia? Just guess. 300 only. 300. And in that insurance industry is growing very fast. And how much you pay for actuaries industry? Very expensive. Why don't we utilize ASEAN community to invite, to reduce the price? It's good for Indonesia. And there
Isn't it threatening our talent in terms of our human competitiveness, in terms of our human quality, if there's an influx of talented workers from abroad?
Already there. Because, if you hire Indonesian accountant, they ask for higher salary, more luxurious car, and at least live in Kebayoran. If you hire IPB, Kabat is okay, Kijang is okay. So, because the scarcity is there, and to solve the scarcity, we need to find them here. And in the other side, there are 17,000 engineers, oil and gas engineers, working overseas. 400 alone in Saudi Aramco. So it's normal. We are surplus in certain area. We export them because our oil company pay them less. They fly to other countries. It's not, that's the reality now.
So there's no fear that our best talent will go out to other countries within ASEAN region?
From a certain sectors, yes. But that's okay. That's the consequence of free movement of labor, free movement of capital.
Okay.
I would like to appeal our colleagues here, friends, to pulang kampung.
To reduce the price.
Because
responsible.
And also our PAI, Persatuan Engineer Indonesia, saying that because our way of pembangunan is getting bigger, now we have a shortage of engineers.
So we need these talents.
Right. So I blame Pak Umar because he's not working as an engineer. He's economist right now.
All right, we're having 10 minutes late. 10 minutes left. I'd like to allocate that time for this gentleman.
My name is Ali Fandi. Thank you for the illuminating presentations. It's a question for Pak Bambang. First of all, can you comment on Cilamaya? What's happening with Cilamaya? As far as I understand, that project, there's been a feasibility study by JICA. It was in the PPP book, and now the government, there are conflicting statements from various ministers. One, what is that indicative of? Bad feasibility study or weak governance? Secondly, on land acquisition, this is not about transport, but about Batang. A couple of weeks ago, the head of the National Land Agency said that the acquisition process is complete. There's no comment from Bima Sena on that. Is that is that an indicator of better things to come in terms of land acquisition, or is this just a one-off thing because it's been delayed for so long? Thank you very much.
Very specific questions. Second one first. The IPP 2 times 1,000 megawatts of Batang is still has some problems in terms of land acquisition. Only left about 10 to 15%. But the location is in the middle of all the sites, so they could not build the IPP under competition. And again, I would like to appeal all my colleagues here to pulang kampung as soon as possible. There are so many jobs there. I think that the jobs will try to find you rather than you find the job. And all the best for all of you here.
Okay, Mas Faisal, final words or thought?
I think the government will speed up the process, should speed up the process of infrastructure development. This is good momentum as bigger rule, fiscal rule implement, and list of projects are very open, very transparent. Everybody can see and can evaluate, and I think it will work. But it takes time to realize, what the ideal one. But as Bambang said, no need to finalize everything. they will come to Indonesia, very aggressive one, especially from Japan, China, and many others. They offer very high bid, for example, for PPPI, petrochemical in Tuban, complex in Tuban, very aggressive one from China especially. So I'm quite optimistic, and let's give the government time to consolidate.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Faisal. Why I remember about Akbar Faisal? I didn't want Mr. Faisal Basri. Really apologize about that.
Well, I just would like to add the Cilamaya, ONWJ, operated by Pertamina, produced 40,000 barrels per day. Very quite big oil field there.
Right.
So if they want to build Cilamaya, maybe they can move from existing one to 2 kilometers far from the existing one.
Mas Faisal Basri, thank you for the time. Dr. Bambang Susantono, thank you for the time. I'd like to give it back to the Master of Ceremony.